The final two alternate arts of the new Albus collection have been revealed in the Japanese YCS today, and those alt arts join Fallen of Albaz and Incredible Ecclesia that were revealed last week in the Infinite Forbidden reveals. We were all guessing what those new alt arts could be, and most of us probably got it right. We got a new alternate art for Aluber the Jester of Despia, which was very obvious, the main pillar of the story. But while everybody was guessing that Kit will also get an alt art, it was actually Blazing Cartesia the Virtuous that got a new alt art as well. So now we have the four alt arts together, but in this video, let's break down some Easter eggs and things that we found in the new arts of Aluber the Jester of Despia and Blazing Cartesia the Virtuous. If you haven't seen the last video, then check it out right up here, and let's begin. So let's start off with Blazing Cartesia the Virtuous. This was a character that was introduced much later in the story, much later than Aluber, Ecclesia, and Fallen of Albaz, of course. And we saw Cartesia appear in many of the artworks around the story, combined of course with her dragon Granguignol, but also in the art of Branded Regained and Branded Befallen that taught us a little bit more about Cartesia's connection to the underworld. So the two major things that you can see in Cartesia's new artwork are... Right, let's move it along. Starting off, in all seriousness, with the hands in the background. We can see a lot of those white hands reaching forward like the arms of Cartesia, and this could be a reference to the 666 virtuous souls that are trapped in her body. In the story of the Despia and Dogmatica, we learned about 666 saints of the Dogmatica Church, and at this point in the story, Cartesia has so many souls trapped inside of her that these hands could be a reference for those souls reaching out towards the viewer. We don't really know who Cartesia is reaching out to, but it could be many people, probably Fallen of Albaz if we're looking at that side of the story, but we'll probably never know. In the background, we can see the stained glass wings of Granguignol. We also saw a reference to that in the new artwork of Incredible Ecclesia, but those iconic wings are of course the wings of Granguignol the Dusk Dragon, the dragon that Cartesia has created from the fallen bodies of the Despia, that of course reference the world of church and religion. Churches usually have those beautiful stained glass windows, and Granguignol's wings also are formed with those beautiful vitrage stained glass patterns. So could it be that Granguignol is actually standing behind her in this image, or the wings are now hers, similar to what we see in the art of Branded Befallen? Well, both answers could probably be true, but it makes perfect sense in the context of Cartesia. The horns on the head, that is a mystery. We've only been working on investigating these artworks for a few hours now, and we didn't really come up with any new information. These horns are not represented in any part of the story. Those are not Granguignol horns. Those are not Cartesia's horns. Whose horns are these? I'm honestly not really sure. Leave it down in the comments below if you have any idea what those horns could be referenced to. They could remind you somewhat of maybe Ecclesia's horns, but much larger and kind of like black and gold, but there's not really any realistic reference up until now. And lastly, just a small detail, in the art of Branded Regained, we see Cartesia actually wearing gloves. We can also see that in the art of the real Cartesia. We can see that in greater detail in Regained, but right now in this artwork, since it's mainly focused on Cartesia reaching towards the viewer, we see no gloves. And this is also a question about both artworks, and we're going to talk about Aluber in a second. Where is this art located within the story? With Albaz and Ecclesia, we obviously know that those alternate arts take place after the end of the story, after the story of New Frontier, where Ecclesia and Albaz fly away from the land. But here, we're not really sure if this is sort of like a midpoint in the story or some sort of a continuation after the story is over. Of course, Cartesia doesn't really exist after being fused with Albaz to create Sanctifier, but this could be somewhere along those lines, maybe somewhere in between. So yeah, this was Cartesia, very nice artwork. And yeah, let's move on to the main course, in my opinion, which is Aluber the Jester of Despia. We already knew, basically, that Aluber is going to get an alt art because it is such a pivotal character, an important character in the story. It also technically had another alt art with the Aluber the Dogmatic token, which I absolutely love the art there. But this version of Aluber is probably like the third or fourth version of Aluber after the Jester, after the unmasked version in Aluber the Dogmatic, and of course the bestial Aluber. This is also sort of like a not very clear point in time. We're not really sure if this is in the end of the story, after the story. It doesn't really make sense thematically, but it's probably much later in the timeline because we already saw Aluber changing forms throughout the story, so this has to be after. The first thing, the cracked red crystal on the chest. We saw the same reference in the Albaz artwork, but here we see Aluber's red crystal being cracked, and our assumption is that when Albaz and Aluber fused into Alba Lenidus in the art of course, branded fusion, following that, Aluber actually expelled Albaz's body from Alba Lenidus, and we can see that in the art of branded expulsion. And this also shows sort of like the core of Alba Lenidus cracking open and exploding, removing Fallen of Albaz from its form, and this could be a reference to that expulsion, basically. We can see the chain of dimensional holes now sort of like 3D. We already saw those sort of like diamond-shaped dimensional holes a lot in the Albaz story in reference to Aluber specifically, but now it's sort of like created a weapon in a chain where those diamond shapes are actually three-dimensional, which is extremely cool. And speaking about the weapon, obviously a fiery sword, extremely cool. We already saw Aluber that he can actually shoot fire from his sort of like ring on his finger, but now it's a full-fledged weapon, and on the weapon we can see sort of like a cross shape that I'm not really sure what that could be, but one of our assumptions is that this could be a reference to the Knights Templar cross. And if you don't know what that cross is, it was of course the symbol of the Templar Knights back in the Middle Ages, but it also signifies martyrdom and sacrificing yourself in death for the good of others. So this could definitely tie in to the Albaz, or Aluber rather, story. Now on Aluber's shoulder we can see two halves of a dragon's skull. One of them is black and one of them is white, which could mean a lot of things in the context of the Fallen of Albaz story. We already saw Aluber turning into a dragon, which was of course Masquerade and Lubellion, and we also know that the other half of Aluber is Albaz, and he also turns into dragons. And branded in white, branded in red, we can see half black, half white. That could mean so many different things. Probably the sort of like duality between Aluber and Albaz, signifying the two types of dragons they form into. Surrounding Albaz, all over the art, we can see the Despia wings. We can see those wings appearing first in the art of Dramaturge of Despia, sporting these huge finger-like, wing-like wings, kind of like super iconic from the story. Later on, we can also see those wings in or at least the reference of those wings in things like Branded and Central Dogmatica, and finally, of course, Despia Lulu Wololith sporting those exact wings. So, similar to the fact that Despia and Lulu is the Despia form of Fleur, then even though Aluber was already a Despian, this is sort of like the same transformation that Lulu went on, looking like a total badass and like sort of like a dark character. Then Aluber is also getting those wings, and it means that this could also be like an alternate path with not turning into a bestial at the end, but rather enhancing its dogmatic form or something like that. Aluber still has the bestial horns on his head, so that could mean it is past the timeline of the art of Branded Beast where he actually gets those horns, but the mask is gone and there's sort of like a new mask with 3 eyes on his face. We're not really sure where this is referenced from. Maybe this could be a reference to the draconic form of Despian Queritus. You can see it in the art of Branded Banishment, but there's no real reference that we can find. So if you know what that means, you can leave it down in the comments below. So yeah, this has been Cartesia and Aluber, the new artworks joining Fallen of Albaz and Incredible Ecclesia. Those will all be released in the White Story Complete file, the new Albaz collection in the OCG. Fingers crossed we get those as soon as possible in the TCG as well. Leave a like if you enjoyed, subscribe for more content like this. If you like this, you might like other videos as well on the channel. So leave a sub and yeah, comment down below. I'll see you in the next one. Have a great day. Peace out.